Fears over anthropogenic climate change and environmental degradation can easily lead to incoherent, apocalyptic fear-mongering. Yet this does not bring about healthy political discourse on how to best combat this devastating phenomenon. Anthropogenic climate change and environmental degradation is an enormous issue, both in terms of size and scope, making it extraordinarily difficult for humans to fully grasp and come to terms with the importance of this issue. In the meantime, we continue to deplete resources far faster than the Earth can replenish them, and spew hazardous greenhouse gases, putting billions at risk. As such, we must fully dedicate ourselves towards finding the best way to deal with these risks. The consumerist culture present in developed nations, and the faulty notion that maximizing material goods is complementary to maximizing success, leads to a worsening climate, exacerbates already present inequalities, and makes the Earth a harsher place for future generations. Therefore, the public that this issue affects includes all humans alive today, who all carry differentiated responsibilities for climate change, and future generations, as they too are impacted by our actions and inactions. It's important that in the process we view climate change as a shared responsibility as defined by Young, rather than assigning guilt to those deemed more responsible, as this will lead to hostilities and stall any substantive talks on climate change alleviation. The advent of fossil fuels for powering machinery has pushed mankind to remarkable levels of prosperity. Yet this has come at a massive cost, which humans have been wary to fully take to heart. This is because humans have extreme difficulty in thinking and worrying about events that do not directly impact them. When it comes to climate change, developed nations tend to fall into such a trap since the current devastation caused by climate change has very little impact on the day-to-day lives of those in the developed world. And when climate change eventually impacts the daily happenings in the developed world, few alive today will be around, and by that time, it will be too late to act. The public that is directly involved in climate change is everyone alive now and in the future, as, according to Dewey, quote, "The public consists of all those who are affected by the indirect consequences of transactions," end quote, and everyone now and in the future is affected by the indirect consequences of material transactions between people. Some contend that stateless people should not be included in the public due to their non-involvement in political institutions. However, stateless people are not innocent as Arendt suggests, as it would be unfair to exclude them from political institutions because they're linked to these institutions through indirect connections, like being impacted by and contributing to climate change. The current global order, upheld by Western international institutions, disproportionately benefit those who live in the developed world and harms those who don't. Therefore, the West should be mostly implicated for anthropogenic climate change, as the inherently wasteful culture of consumerism is upheld by Western institutions at the expense of the developed world. Our overconsumption of resources can be seen in the rapid decline in fish population. Roughly 85% of global fisheries are either depleted, overexploited, or in recovery. This is problematic, as the world's population has been estimated to increase to over 9 billion by 2050, with the vast majority of growth occurring in impoverished nations. Many people's livelihoods and survival in undeveloped nations are dependent upon the existence of fish, yet the saturation of trawlers has led to its depletion, furthering already existing inequalities. Singer would suggest that for these reasons, people living in the developed world need to give as much money as they can to the most effective charities. While it's important that individuals give money, it's difficult to see how those in the developed world will follow this philosophy of effective altruism. Therefore, a different form of responsibility is needed. According to Young, obligations of justice are based on the social connection between human beings. This connection is not merely between people who directly interact. It's between people working within a complex system of independent, interacting processes that contribute to structural injustices. This completely avoids the slippery slope of assigning guilt, as no individual is isolated as responsible. This would be contested by David Miller, who would claim that leaving the determination of one's responsibility for climate change to the actor herself will lead to continued suffering, as no one would be willing to accept responsibility. However, this line of thinking is incorrect. If an actor's responsibility is determined by other actors, then any substantive talks would boil over into ugly finger-pointing. To avoid finger-pointing, responsibility for climate change is distributed among all of the responsible persons, each being individually responsible in a partial way. This is because the individual alone does not produce the outcome. Rather, she is responsible for some unknown part of it. This responsibility can only be carried out collectively. as no individual can fix the massive and complex problem of anthropogenic climate change and environmental degradation. As such, the responsibility lies in individuals, and the mechanism that does the acting is a collective. I contend that the collective is best represented by large institutions, like multinational corporations and governments, which should do most of the acting on behalf of ordinary people. Each of these institutions will have common responsibility for climate change, yet this responsibility will be differentiated according to their contribution to climate change. The soon-to-be signed Paris Agreement from the COP21 negotiations is a document highly representative of my proposals. It places import on common but differentiated responsibility by getting 186 nations to sign, each having their own defined proposals to ensure that the global temperature does not increase by more than 2 degrees Celsius. This agreement also takes into account Hoagie's belief that international institutions benefit the developed world at the expense of the global impoverished, by setting up an agreement where developed nations provide money to the impoverished nations that cannot afford to pay for the measures to alleviate the damages caused by climate change. While this agreement makes needed headway into preventing climate change from too adversely impacting our planet, more still needs to be done. The deal does not prevent us from passing the 2 degrees Celsius ceiling, and the current global institutions that benefit the rich countries at the expense of the poor and help perpetuate the destructive Western-based culture of consumerism were overlooked in this treaty and need to be changed in order to successfully stem climate change.